Hey guys, and welcome to episode 6 of Cubed, the Marvel Snap podcast. And today I am joined with the always gentlemanly gentleman, Bok Choy, aka Dakota, and Dark Helmet, aka Don. I don't know. That was so long-winded. I ran out of oxygen. So, on tonight's episode, we have some exciting things to go over that we don't even need an icebreaker. The juicy part of this week is last week's OTA. There's some good, there's some bad, but I think everything that they did to the changes in general kind of benefited Marvel Snap overall, because a lot of things that they changed were really overpowered. And I feel they're trying to not raise decks to be tier 1, but I think if you bring every tier 1 deck to about tier 2, we'll see a new tier 1. Right? If there's no tier 1, then everything is about in the same tier 2 level, and then that's automatically tier 1. So I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't know if I'm thinking about it wrong or right. So what do you think in general? What do you think about the update, Don?
Matt, you know what? I can really enjoy this update. I noticed for myself that the main deck I was climbing through the ladder with was a Thanos deck, and I had Lockjaw in there. I noticed that Lockjaw with the RNG was giving me some good output some of the time, but was giving me crap the rest of the time.
Oh, okay.
So by pulling him out, it really did improve my gameplay, right? So I removed Lockjaw from the deck, and I inserted Cold Obsidian, and I noticed a lot more consistent grind up. In fact, it was so consistent that I went from sliding slowly out of the 90s to, now I'm infinite, baby.
Woo! Congratulations!
Yeah,
that's
my boy.
I don't have sound effects yet. So, how about yourself, Dakota? How do you feel this OTA did overall?
Well, it definitely ruined my life. I miss Lockjaw being Lockjaw, so my ramp stuff has been changed around quite drastically, which has made me pivot and get beaten up. And I'm fighting for my life out here. So, it is what it is. I would prefer them not to have touched Lockjaw, but here we are. So I'm rolling with it.
Okay, so it's now that we're done with the overall, I want to kind of get into each card that they changed. So we'll talk a little bit about like every little thing that they did to each card and see how you feel about it. Did it benefit the game? Did it benefit your playstyle, or is it detrimental to the future of Marvel Snap? So the first card we'll go into is the Adam Warlock change. So the Adam Warlock change, he was a 2-cost 0 power, and they changed him to a 5-cost 4 power. So Dakota, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that they still need to do some work on this card. It seems like the additional change in cost and power still doesn't make up for its ability being kind of crap. Like, in reality, it's all well and good. It can replace Crystal if you're able to win that lane already. But at the same time, cool, yeah, you can do that. You're not going to have the negative effect of what Crystal does, where she gives both players, you and your opponent, a card draw. So that's cool and all, but in reality, it's kind of, I don't know, it needs to be reworked a little bit more. I think there's some better opportunities they could do. That's my opinion.
Wait, so you think that the effect is bad?
It's for it to have to get going. Like, there's so many better 5-cost cards for you to put out there. I feel like that when you're looking at its opportunities, what you could do, it's not the best in my opinion.
Okay, I feel that. Yeah, I mean, with a bunch of 5 cards that can rival it, I'm thinking like having an extra draw on turn 6 might not be as beneficial. But I'll go more into my thoughts after you, Don. How do you feel about the change on this card?
Honestly, I feel like this card really didn't change that much. Even though the cost and the amount of power it puts out definitely changed, um, the usefulness of it really didn't. Right? Only getting that extra pull at the end of turn 5, at the end of like that's 2 extra cards. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have them, but to lose that turn 5 really kind of makes this card. I don't know. It's not going to make me play it any more than I played it before.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, like, I heard a lot of people talking about it, and this card basically ran in, what is it, negative, and cards that just output early power because, it was a 2-0 before. So if you output early power, you'll get to benefit. Even if you do power on turn 1, if you play this on turn 2 and they can't beat that power, they would basically get that free draw, right? So now you can't play it until turn 5, and I feel that's, in my honest opinion, I think it's fair because in one way, drawing cards is it's going to be really hard for them to balance around cards that draw. Right, because in this in this game, it's very probability. Right, if you just draw the set amount of cards that each turn allows you to draw, every game you're not drawing 3 cards. So every game there's a probability that you're not going to see 3 of the cards that are in your deck. So that's what makes it kind of broken. Like if you're able to draw every single card in your deck and run the combo that you want almost every single time, it can get very bad for the game. I mean, you see that kinda with the old Hela / MODOK Hela deck, right? If there weren't any counters to that deck, like just running Enchantress, running a Cosmo, that deck does really well because you draw every card, and every card that's in your hand gets discarded and placed on the field. So it's like a turn 6 power move, right? So it's a very good deck when it can work, but then there weren't too many downsides to it. So when there's
let me play a little bit devil's advocate on this though.
Okay.
Your argument is right? That Hela deck, it works really well.
Yes.
But the problem is you have to be winning the lane, right? And in the Hela deck, you're typically not winning lanes until the very, very end.
Yeah, until the very end.
Ultimately, even with that deck, like as soon as you see it, the chances of them winning a lane on turn 5 with 4 power, let's say, like it's not going to happen. Like, and that's really where I'm coming from. It's like, yes, the power could be really amazing, but the problem is, like, for that deck, it's not going to help you. Right? If you're playing the Tribunal deck, right? Yeah, you get an extra card, right? But the problem is you've just taken the place of those last 3 turns you want to hit those big cards, right? So you're replacing one of those cards out from it. So really, it doesn't benefit you in those ones that you really need those cards.
Oh, I'm not talking about like putting it in that deck. What I'm saying is it's very hard to balance with a card that draws. Because if you draw your whole deck, then it kind of alleviates counterplay. So that's why it's very hard to balance this card, is what I'm saying. So I wouldn't put it in a Hela Tribunal deck. Because in a MODOK Hela Tribunal deck, you're already drawing all your cards. I wouldn't put that card in because it has low power, Because you have, what is it? You have Jubilee, you have Magic to give you that extra turn. You have Crystal, which you don't care if your opponent draws a card because as long as you draw a card, it's benefiting you, right? So that's like 3 extra turns there. So that's 3 extra cards, right? So that's what I'm saying is because that deck can draw all of its cards, it's very detrimental to the game unless you have its counter, right? But a lot of decks don't run a counter. Right? A lot of times I get busted by Tribunal here and there that are running the same thing, right? Because Lyeth has fallen off. Enchantress has fallen off a lot. You can run a tech Enchantress, but a lot of decks don't run tech Enchantress. Cosmo you very rarely see them. So it's just hard for a card like Adam Warlock to be, what is that, balanced, because it's a draw power card. So I wouldn't mind them just changing his effect to something better. So I mean, drawing is really good, but then a 5/4 that draws you just what, 2 cards if you play a Magic, 1 card if you have 6 turns. I mean, overall, I think they're putting him in like a placeholder kind of area, the same where Spider-Man 2099 is. So, I mean, it's the same power, right? It's a 5/4. No, he's 5'8".
It's 5'4".
No, Spider-Man 2099. I think he's 5'4", 5'8".
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
loading in.
It's all right. So we'll go ahead and move on. So Darkhawk got changed also from a 4/0 to the same thing as Adam Warlock, to a 5/4. So share your thoughts on that, Don.
Oh man, this kind of changed it up a bit for me. I know this card was used to just kind of like run a half deck of a lot of different things. I think this really kind of hit this card with the Durf stick. Between going, playing on turn 5 now, and I mean, don't get me wrong, you get those 4 extra power, which is kind of nice. So this card gets a lot bigger, but it already took a pretty decent hit when we got Blob into the game. I think we're going to see this card not be played that often, and I know I haven't played him since the change.
Okay. So the thing I noticed most about Darkhawk that they changed is he can no longer be hit by Zabu. He can no longer get hit by Ravonna. So there's no discount at all on this card. He kind of reminds me of the what is the guy? Oh, Ronin. He reminds me of a Ronin, but just a different effect. He does get the +2 power just like Ronin, but the power comes from a different, they come from different places. So I feel like he got the Ronin treatment. So what are your thoughts on this card now that it has been changed, Dakota?
Honestly, I think that it's kind of interesting that they added the power to it. I wonder if it's because of the blob. They didn't like that the blob can just delete this guy, and so they handled the blob by making it he caps at 15. And most decks you're going to run him in, going to have high powered cards, so it doesn't really wipe your deck. So it's interesting that they gave it a buff and a nerf at the same time. Not being able to Zabu it, not being able to Ravonna. Like, there's a lot of negatives now too, which is kind of interesting. Just on the ladder, haven't really run across too many Darkhawks, and I mean, ever since the blob came out, like Don mentioned, like, yeah, he's definitely taken a back seat compared to where he used to be. Like, dude, Rocks and Hawks was everywhere. Trying to fight that was crazy. When the blob came out, it was such an easy snap. It was like, okay, cool. They have no idea what I'm about to do. Great. They're going to Mystique that. Cool. Will we see a change in the future on cost? Probably. I don't think it's going to sit like this for very long because it's going to go into that place where it just doesn't get played that much. Now, with Pixie coming out, there might be some changes, but, I'm just curious to see.
What a pull. Wow, already bringing a Pixie into the... But yeah, I think this card being what it is, because it's been such it never really got hit by anything, right? Like every patch, it did, I want to say it did significantly well, but it never really fell off. So in every patch like that we've had, it would come up with, oh, there's a Darkhawk deck that's performing very, very decently. Yep. It won't reach like tier 1, but it might, beat tier 1s here and there. So a lot of the Darkhawk package was very plug and play. So you could like plug in those 3 cards, which is Rock Slide, Korg, and him. And if you want to include Mystique, you could plug those 4 cards into another deck and it could still run efficiently because you're still getting that the pluses from that. So now that we can't get that. I'm kind of interested to see where Darkhawk goes from here, or if we just don't see him anymore. I mean, we just recently started to see, what is his name, Ronin, because of the Grandmaster change. But on top of that, there was like the discard deck that ran him very, very good with the Hela. So we're starting to see like little things that people are thinking of to play around this high cost. So I'm wondering if we'll see something in the future, you know, or maybe they change them because there's something in the works that we don't know, you know? So, so coming up to the next card, Destruction's favorite buff or former favorite buff, Forge. So he changed from a 1/1 to a 2/2, but this isn't really a change. This is actually just seeing him go back to his normal cost, right? So I think in a way, this card was meant to be nerfed because Destruction, as Glenn, I forgot what his title is, but he does a lot of the balancing, if I'm not mistaken. But he's mentioned that Destruction has been one of the most consistent archetypes in seasons. Like, it's not just like the past season. It's just like it's a top performer for almost every season because, you know, they rarely it's kind of hard to touch Destroy and make it crumble, right? So I think the support cards that Destroy uses has to be fine-tuned. That way Destroy is not really a major, I don't know. I don't want to say major player because I hope that every deck can, you know, at least if there's a way to be on par that, you know, you can win, you can lose. And that's why it's funny to think that this game is 50% win rate is a good deck, right? So what are your thoughts, Don, on Forge's change?
I'm good with it. You know, I think moving him back to what he was is a really good adjustment. You still see him in that deck. It's just you can't play as many cards at the same time, right? But let's be honest. Like in the Destruction deck, being able to forge turn 1 and then hit Deadpool turn 2 and destroy him. I mean, it is just a crazy combo that you could hit. And then that card just instantly just stacks and stacks and stacks. So I think they were just looking for something to kind of slow it down a bit. Because even like the other cards that can increase in that deck, right? So you have like Hulkbuster, right? You know, at least that's a little bit more random. It's also turn 3 before you can get there. I think ultimately this card's change is a good thing. It just going back to what it was.
How about yourself, Dakota?
Yeah, I think Don said it pretty well on that because it's a way to kind of put the brakes on Deadpool big time. I mean, not to mention too, I tried that Patriot deck a lot. One of the things I miss was the old school Patriot deck when you're hopping in with Brood is hitting this guy off first, and then you can, you know, just hit him with Absorbing Man. Like there's a lot of missed power with that, and that's a good balance. I think that it makes sense across the board because, you know, there's still ways you can beef up your Deadpool and other things, but you know, you still got Nico. You still have other cards that can run smooth just like that. That's in that niche that we were used to with him. Will they change her? Probably not. She's one cost for a reason. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think that I'm cool with that balance for sure.
Yeah, I think when you mention Nico, it's like the planets have to align for you to play play like every turn the right way, you know? Yeah. Because Nico has, if I'm not mistaken, 10 effects. So if it has 10 effects and you're only able to see at max 7, is it 10 or am I wrong, Don?
I think it's like 6 or 7. It's not 10.
Is it not? Okay.
I'll go.
No.
Pull her up.
Okay. While Dakota looks,
I think it's like 6.
Okay. While Dakota looks that up. Yeah, but you know, you're not meant, because even her effect is taking place in your deck, right? So you never know what effect you missed. So every turn you're just like, or like every game, you know,
It's 7.
Oh, okay, it's 7. So yeah, so if you don't have, say if you have her turn 1, the only time you're going to see every effect is if you have magic. So if that, you know, it is a good card, like Dakota said, to replace Forge, because it's not as reliable. And I think that's what they're trying to do is, you know, throttle destroy, so that way it slows it down to keep the pace with the other decks.
Mm-hmm.
So the other card that was changed is another 1 cost. Well, now Forge is a 2 cost, but so this card stays a 1 cost. This card is Ant-Man. So Ant-Man's change is when you fill the location, instead of getting +3, you get +4 on his power. So he, instead of being a 1/4, he ends up being a 1/5 when you fill the location. What do you think about the change on this, Dakota?
You know, every time I see Ant-Man now, because the big deck we got built up on was Zoo. So, like, I'm excited to see this guy again. I'm like, oh, man, this was the homie, man. When we started off, that was, like, the final play. It's like, I'll throw that down. Like, what you gonna do now, huh? I don't think so. And then when I really got into my Destroyer decks, like, he was a big player, too, because you would always have your option to Spectrum. I like that they gave him a little bit of power because, you know, in the upper decks where we're at now, we're not running anything with him. Now I'm seeing him again. I think it's cool. It's not just, oh, cool, 1 cost. That's Nebula. Oh, that's Sunspot. Like, or here's Spider-Ham. Like, now we got something that it's interesting to see how these playstyles move together, and I'm all for it. I'm cool, like, beefing this guy up again. It's cool to see.
You know, it's amazing how 1 power just changes everything, right? Like, I can't count how many games I've lost because I just was 1 power short. And you take this card and let's say, you know, in an ongoing Spectrum deck, right? Because that's where you're probably going to see him the most. Now you have not a 1/5, you have a 1/7, right? And that just beefs this card like crazy. Like Dakota said, like we grew up on Zoo. Like our early game in this was that was the number 1, the first time I ever hit Infinite. It was Zoo deck. I was happy as could be, right? Seeing this card back is just, it brings all of that nostalgia back. I'm just like, okay. And I'm excited to play it.
And I think the support for a Zoo type deck has been really growing. I mean, they have oh my god, I'm very bad with names on the spot. But Black Swan, you know, so that's a support for a Zoo type deck if you can play it. Shauna, where like she just brings ones out of nowhere. So it's really cool to see that they do have a way of making Zoo competitive, because even in the upper games, you could see that Zoo is no joke, right? You play Shauna on turn 3, you play Kazar on turn 4, Blue Marvel turn 5, and then you can play a bunch of like 1s on turn 6. Even if you get Killmonger and destroy Shauna's old stuff, you could just, you know, drop 6 1s if you have 6 1s in your hands. So it's really cool to see that they are kind of keeping that archetype alive, because like you guys said, it is something that we, you know, as lower level players, Zoo is the best deck to play the game with, because Killmonger, you don't see him until you're pool 2?
Pool 3 or
pool 2 or 3?
2 or 3.
Yeah, so I think it's pool 2, because pool 3 is the one.
I think so.
Yeah, because pool 3 is where you have to start buying cards.
Oh, okay, yeah, it has to be 2 then.
Yeah, so like all those games up until pool 2 were amazing, because you're like, they're not going to see this, you know, because we did our research playing, you know, the game. So it's like, okay, the deck that we need to make is this Zoo deck. So, you know, people that just jump into the game and don't do any research on it, they're like, oh, I just want to play my favorite. I want to play Captain America. I want to play, you know, Iron Man, you know. So it's cool to see that they do make these changes to make these cards that we haven't used in a while relevant again. So I'm glad to see Ant-Man get that change. That way we could play him again and have some of that nostalgia back. Now we move on to the next card that we used to very much love, and then they changed it, and then they changed it, and they changed it back again or something like that. So we're going to America Chavez. So she used to be the most widely used card because she was, a placeholder that you knew you were getting on turn 6. Then they changed her to I think a 1/2, and then a 2/3, and now they're changing her back into a 1/2. So yeah, so she was a 2 power, 2 cost 3 power. Now she's a 1 cost 2 power. How do you feel about them reverting this change, Don?
Honestly, I'd rather them change her back to her original. Like, ever since America Chavez switched to this, I haven't really played her in a lot of decks. I know she gets played in certain decks, but because you never know what that top card is, you never know what you're hitting that +2 to, right? So, to me, I think it's good that they moved her back to a 1/2. It makes her a little more viable for the people who do like to use her. But for me, myself, haven't used her a whole lot. Now, thinking about the conversation we just had, and this kind of clicked in my brain right now, this might be viable in a zoo deck, right? So if you're running a zoo deck, you play this card, you're hitting another 1 card with a +2, you're going to be putting all that out. That actually might work out pretty well. So, like, yes, when we go back to messing around with it, I think I got a new project to work on.
That's not a bad call out. I didn't even think about, putting America in a zoo deck. But, in a zoo deck, you kind of don't care what you hit with that +2, right? Because you have all those low cards that you want buffed up. So it's very cool that, you mentioned that Zoo got another buff. I didn't even think about that. So what's your thought on this change to America? Dakota.
Sorry. It's funny now that Don mentioned that. I'm like running through my head all the possibilities of that too, and I'm like, oh man, because Zoo is wild. You're able to run that. Sometimes when we get the challengers and missions, it's like, play 1 cost cards. I'll just play Conquest with that and completely whip people's butts because they have no idea what the heck. You're like, oh my gosh, it's a Zoo deck, and then you're too late. You don't have Killmonger to take it. And I wish I'm with Dawn too. Would love for her to be back in the places she could be, like she was. That was amazing. Missed that Marvel Snap, but again, like we already discussed early on, especially with Adam Warlock, like that's kind of the thing that makes this game so unique is you don't have cards that break it like that, and if you do, they don't last for too long. So yeah, I'm cool with it. I would like to see some playtests with Zoo. I'm excited to see what we all cook up.
I haven't played a zoo deck in a while, and I don't think I know where to start with that. But like you guys said, I'm glad to see that she will be getting some use in something, because I think for most, or for like a lot of people, this was their most split card because they played her in everything. Because, she was just a placeholder card where you knew you're getting her at turn 6, and then you just like, okay, if I could play her, I'll play her. If not, then I'll play around her. So it's such a cool thing that they thought about the aspects. I know she lasted probably almost a year with that effect. So it's good to know that they're thinking about the healthiness of the game in the future and not making everything so redundant, broken, everything. There is a probability to everything. So people have to think of, that's why deck trackers are so good, right? Because you're able to look at what's left in your deck and make a calculated decision. Now, I know they don't have any deck trackers in mobile yet, but once it does come out, and once we're able to see cards that have been discarded, cards that your opponent made you discard, cards that are still left in your deck, it's going to make play evolve in the right direction, right? Because instead of people just like, I think I still have this, or, yeah, I constantly have to think right now, like, oh, okay, what's in the rest of this deck? Because this deck has probably changed so much. Which version am I running? So, you're drawing cards and you're like, okay, what's left in my deck? Everything has to be in your head. But once they do create a deck tracker, that would be amazing to see, where this goes, because it will evolve everybody's play, in my opinion. So the next card we have on the docket is the one that Dakota mentioned, and I'll have him start this off because he was so so amped up about it, was the Lockjaw change. So the Lockjaw change, he went from a 3 cost 2 power to a 4 cost 5 power. All right, Dakota, grab your pitchfork and get us started.
All right. First off, what the hell? No, straight up, man. Come on, you just disrespect an entire ramp. I was so mad by this. When we got the notification that there was a change, I said, "Okay, Dark Hawk don't care. Okay, don't care. I was like, "What the fuck?" Like, I was so mad. Like, come on, man, why'd you do this to me? I love the Thanos rep. Okay, I have been vibing with that. They do this to me, and I'm still fighting for my life on the ladder because of these mother truckers. I was so mad. Oh, I was so mad. Now, I know that we watched. I think it was Cozy and Alex talked about it. I agree with them on this statement. If they were going to change something up, I think it'd have been cool that every turn that he does something and like swaps a card out, he goes down in power. That would make way more sense to me, because now I'm still able to ramp. I've still got that ability. But now that they changed it to this, I'm over here fighting for my life. So
all
I don't like it.
What do you think about this change, Don?
Honestly, this card probably needs to change, right? It was using its power, or it was being used in a lot of decks, right? So you had those Hella decks or those big power decks that you're pulling with Lockjaw and pulling these giant cards out. And being on turn 4, you could still play into this 3 times, right? So you could fill whatever lane it's in. And with the addition to all the ramp cards that are coming out, because we're seeing some ramp and some cost change cards they're kind of flying through, we're actually going to see it. Second of all, it's a 4 cost now, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what affects that card?
Zabu
takes it right back to where it was. So yes, you have to do an extra thing, but you know what? Ultimately, I don't think for the people who really, really want to play the Lockjaw, card is still going to work out. I know. On a side note, like I mentioned earlier, like honestly, them changing this card was great for me because I got outside of the cycle of playing that I was in and changed up a little bit, and did a lot better. So, but as for the card itself, the exact opposite of Dakota. The card itself, I think is going to be. People are going to find ways to play it. Just like everyone said that it was going to die the first time it changed, where you could play as many and it pop up as many any turn. Like when they made it, you could only send 1 card away a turn. Like everyone said, "Oh, this card's dead." People are going to find a way to make this card work.
I agree, and I think this card is very roulette style, right? So when you use this card and you could gain something so significantly massive in a short amount of time, turn 3, because turn 3 you could play it already. But if you have a 0 cost card, say you get hit with Elysium, and you have this and a 1 cost card which goes down to 0, you could play it on turn 2 when it was a 3 cost. So it was very, very scary to see where the state of the game would be going if this was allowed to be as is. But because they did make the change, it is a 4 cost. You can still say in a Thanos deck, you could ramp up to him, play a Psylocke on turn 3 or a Greenstone on turn 3, and instead of playing that Devil Dinosaur or that Vision, you play the Lockjaw with a stone, and you still get the same effect. And it could still pull out something big. It could pull out that Vision. It could pull out that Devil Dinosaur. And on top of that, you still have that Lockjaw in your field. But you only have 3 turns now. Or no, 2 turns. Which is, I think it's fair for the game, because when you could gamble and gamble big almost every time, it seems kind of unfair. You know, even though it is, like I said, it's a gamble. So I think they want to lessen the amount of gambling you do in the game, because I got to gamble for the splits already. So in the game, they want to make it more skill based, right? So if you could, minimize the amount of time you spend gambling, then you could make more informed decisions and play off skill instead of like, ooh, I just lucked my way into a win, which sometimes we do, right? And that's the state of the probability game, where you can luck yourself into a win, but they want to minimize that, where it's just like, oh no, good players are good, not lucky players are very lucky. What's up?
There's bad players like myself that very much enjoyed the ramp style.
And I think Don mentioned it very well to say, like, it kind of like pushed him out of his comfort zone, right? Because you kind of get in a style where like, oh man, you know, maybe if I just keep playing this card and, you know, I keep winning with it, you know, I'm getting lucky, but then you're kind of pigeonholing yourself, right? Where like he got himself out of this, he played something else, you know, probably something more skillful, and you know, it made him a better player in that sense.
Yeah, pressure makes diamonds. Or
there you go.
My pipes are bursted and the plumbers are out. I am fighting for my life out here. Goddammit.
So the next change we have is in something we didn't really see coming, because it wasn't really used even in its archetype. So this card is actually Swordmaster. So Swordmaster was just given an extra power. So he came from a 3 cost 6 power to a 3 cost 7 power. So with this card changing, I feel like nothing's really changed. I mean, it's nice to have another point in power. And Don mentioned it earlier that it's crazy how much a 1 power can make a difference. So what are your thoughts on this change on this card and in this card in general, Don?
I think with this card, I think it's kind of gotten pushed out of most discard decks anyways. The upside of even a 7 isn't there for what you get for it, right? You get a random card that goes away, right? I think this card, the power-wise, when it really need to be the thing that needs to change, think they need to make this more targeted like some of the other cards, you know, where you had a premium for like Blade, where, you know, that's a premium cost for a 1/3. That's a pretty good 1 cost, but then you have it targeted. Okay, I can attack this side, right? I know I can pull this card, discard this card. For this card, there's just better options. Like if I want to gamble, you know, we have not Cold Obsidian.
No, yeah.
Corvus Glaive,
Corvus
right?
Glaive, yeah.
You know, like, and you get an extra power, right? I think there are other discards that, like, I don't see how you fit this card into any deck, even with giving it that 1+ power. I don't think it makes much of a difference with this card.
How about yourself, Dakota? Like, I know you haven't been playing discard as much, but how do you feel this card do you think it can change discard, or overall, what are your thoughts on the change?
I think that this card's still not going to see a lot of play because there's better discarding cards. Like, it's cool, but because it is the roll of the dice, I mean, I'd rather go with something like Corvus Glaive or Hell Cow I mean, your stats not bad. 3-7 is cool, but if you're hitting your big cards you need for the and on curve and stuff, you're dealing with some problems there. It's too unpredictable for me to see putting it in my deck right now versus the other cards like Culling Ween. I think if they were to change something like this, it'd be cool to so we know Blade goes to the far right. What if this went to the far left? I don't know. Something like that might make it a little more consistent. But again, it's the same thing like we already mentioned. This is what changes up that style of play because you're not always going to have this perfect cut and dry plan. So I think that it's interesting that they changed up the power on it. I still don't see it being very relevant.
Yeah, and I think like you guys mentioned, the aspect of this card where it is random, right? So there is very much a gamble that you're taking, just like Lockjaw, right? And you can see Lady Sif having a targeted discard at a 3/5. You have Corvus Glaive, like you mentioned, Don, that it does have a random discard, but you have benefits out of Corvus Glaive. Is not only are you getting that extra energy, but you have 2 random discards. Because that's why you would rather play what's his name is Hellcow over this card, because you get 2. Right? Mm-hmm. So if it hits a bad card, it could hit a good card. It could hit 2 good cards. Sometimes it hits 2 bad cards. But, you have a chance, or more than one chance, to hit something good, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when this card only, when Swordmaster only discards 1 card, and it's the wrong card, you feel very bad about it, right? But when...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when Hellcow discards 1 good one, 1 bad one, you're like, oh, I'll take that trade, right? Because it's good power, but you're getting 2 chances at it. Now, of course, you're going to have, like I said, those times where you hit 2 bad cards, but I think that is what makes Hellcow a card that's still being run over something like Swordmaster, because, like I said, you have that better probability, and with that probability, there's less gambling. But I feel like they need to have some gambling cards in this, because discard is probably one of the most reliable that you can do right now because of the targeted discards. So this won't ever see any time in a discard deck because of the better gambling cards we have out there. Like I said, with Hellcow and Corvus Glaive. So the next card that we have on the last card actually is something I haven't seen too much at all. Even though the change is pretty huge. This card is Vulture. So Vulture was changed to, instead of getting a +5 for every move, it gets +6. So I think already Vulture was one of those cards where you moved it once and you were okay with the move, right? Because he starts at a 3/3, 3 cost, 3 power. And if you play him on turn 4 with a Iron Fist, that's it. That before it was a 8, 9, 10. So it's a 4/10 power play because you have Iron Fist, move the Vulture, it gets 5, so it was 8. So now it's a 4/11 play on turn 4. So what are your thoughts on this change overall on this card, Dakota?
I think it's interesting. I'm noticing this pattern right here. We're going through Marvel Snap is we're just getting higher stats. Like stats are going up quickly. It's cool to see how they're kind of trying to contort these cards so that they can kind of follow suit. Because hey, when you get Call Obsidian out there, who's already a 10, you got these other cards. You got Beta Ray. Like there's cards holding this power down, and these older cards are not there anymore. Like you're not seeing them. This is a different archetype, of course. It's move, but hey, if you're able to do some stuff where you can throw out, like, you know how you were mentioning earlier, where the Darkhawk style, you have those 3 or 4 opponents, you can throw this into another deck now. We have cards where it's like, oh, I like this idea of moving things around. That way I can also, okay, if I move something, now Miles Morales is going to go down. So I have just this Ghost and, not Ghost, what's her name? Ghost Spider. And then Miles, like I'm getting stats pretty quickly here. So yeah, like there's a lot of interesting aspects to it. I'm excited to see moving forward if they do different stuff to our move archetype, because really, besides Phoenix Force, I've rarely come across anybody moving stuff anymore.
Yeah, I feel that. And I feel like move kind of deserves that higher power because it takes more brain power to play move. I feel like move is such a unique archetype where if you don't think about stuff that you're doing beforehand and in the time allotted, not to mention that I think you're not going to have a good time with the archetype. So I feel like the change on giving these cards more power is beneficial to people that take the time to actually learn this archetype. So how about your thoughts on this, Don?
I agree, but let's be honest, like move is pretty much a non-competitive deck, right? Like you never really see a whole lot of it when you're playing, right? It's just not one of those decks that we're seeing much of. Adding the power is great, but really the big problem is yeah, it's big brain, but it's also predictable, right? Like you're like, it's big brain, I can move all this stuff here, but it's like, okay, when you start getting towards the end, okay, I can only move so many places, and there's only so many cards that they're going to play towards the end, right? Okay, all this stuff is going to move here. Okay, get rid of it, right? Like from a competitive point of view, I think they need to start reevaluating more of these cards because it really is not sticking up to the standard of even. I mean, think of the most consistent of any other, right? Destroy, there's consistency, right? You have discard, there's consistency, ongoing, right? You have these just amazing decks. Even like stuff that doesn't have any abilities or gets abilities, right? There are a bunch of decks that just you have a competitive version of it. I can't think of a truly competitive move deck.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned just a minute ago was, board space is the thing that makes, bounce competitive, what makes destruction competitive is that they can make board space for themselves. Whereas move, the only competitive move deck I did see was a bounce move deck because you could move things out of the way and then move other cards into it. But without so many cards to do that, I feel like there should be a hybrid like bounce move card. That would be amazing because then that would take the archetype into another, level because then you're making space for yourself to move these cards. Whereas like you said, nearing the end of the game, you're just like, well, I can't move anything. This lane's filled, right? Or they play Professor X in the middle. Like, I can't do anything. I'm done. So I think you mentioned some really good things, and that's why we won't see move. Did you have additional thoughts on that?
No, what? Kind of thinking about this, what they really need is a card that if you move it into that area, it kind of absorbs what gets moved in, or something that just kind of gives you a little extra space, right? Ooh, so
kind of like a blob move deck, a blob move card, something like that.
It would be.
It's almost. It's just almost kind of one of those cards that is kind of like the blob. It's just you move it into that lane and it absorbs the power, right? And then you'd have to figure something out because obviously you just absorb it because you want to keep moving stuff. But
exactly, yeah. So it would have to, and I think that's why move is such a hard archetype to balance because you don't want to change every card, right? But you have to also make any new move cards able to work with the old ones, unless you do a whole rework on every move card, which I don't see them trying to, do. So that's why it'll only be, it's not going to be competitive, but it's very fun. It's, especially when it works, but it's very nerve-wracking because you're just like, oh, sometimes you make moves and you're just like, I didn't have space there. I don't know why I did that. So now overall, how do you feel these changes will, because this is only an OTA. If I'm not mistaken, we still have a patch incoming. So I don't know if that patch it's just going to be quality of life stuff, or they're going to have additional card updates. But going forward, thinking that they won't have any card updates, how do you guys feel about these cards for being usable over the next season?
How do I feel about you cut out just a little bit. How do I feel about the cards doing what?
Yeah, how do you feel about the new OTA buff nerf cards for the upcoming season?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, again, we already know how I feel about Lockjaw, so that's done. I guess I gotta challenge myself and figure out some new styles to play. I kind of like what we discussed. It's going to be cool to just see a few cards here and there, like Ant-Man and everything coming in. I think there's some different style decks that we can start to mess with, and with what they've done, regardless of how I feel, it happens. So here we are. I'm excited always with new stuff because the meta's going to change again, like it already has. I mean, we're running into Patriot decks all the time right now. I tried running a Patriot deck today. Didn't go well, but it was fun. Until I was crying. I mean, it wasn't that. It was okay.
How about yourself, Don? Final thoughts on this OTA?
My final thoughts is I'm excited to see what the future is, right? So one thing that we've learned about this game is that really it all comes down to adaptability, right? Your ability to adapt to the cards you're getting and the ability to adapt to the cards that are being put out there. And I'm not looking at anybody. No. No. But like ultimately it's just that, right? So now we're getting these cards and they've changed, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many times that we look at a card and we're just like, that card doesn't make sense. And that card changing is gonna really not work. And then you get it. Like Nico's a perfect example. Like everyone was kind of like, Nico, that's such a random thing, right? And it's not gonna work. And like it fit right into a deck, and it is like almost a core card in that deck now. Mm-hmm. So I really think that time will tell how these things play out. Me personally, I'm excited to see where we're going.
Yeah, and I think that's the good thing and bad thing about Marvel Snap, right? Because on a weekly basis, it could change. So with them to have to keep up to date with the player base, it's kind of hard on new players to come into this game and get caught up, right? So I think it's something that they kind of have to try and find a middle ground to. And I still don't think they have found it, because say if I started a new account today, it would take a while for me to play against, people that are up in the upper echelons, because I don't have all the cards that they have. Now, I know matchmaking has a lot to do with collection level, right? Either collection level, and I don't know if it's like also win streak or like where you are on the ladder, how well you play. So with that being the way that they factor in that kind of stuff, it's kind of hard to see new players want to play against, some of the like Snapster, Cozy, who else? Alex, so it's kind of interesting to see where they will go from here. But I love that they do these OTAs to keep it fresh. Now, the bad thing that they do is what they do next week, or they have been doing, like I think the last 3 months, is that they're releasing 2 cards at the same time, So not only are they releasing a season pass card, they're releasing a spotlight card. So that's something we'll go into in a bit. But before we go into that, I want to just quickly discuss how you guys did with the card that came out last week, which is Proxima Midnight. So I want to start with you, Don. How did you feel about this card? Did you use it? How did you?
Yeah, I love the card. Like, I think it fits really well into like one of those discard decks where you're just trying to let stuff get hit and pop on the field. So this card felt really good. I think with the discard decks or cards that are going to be coming out, it's actually going to only increase its ability. Like having a 4/7, like that's sometimes going even to your lowest makes that actually your highest, or it makes it a competitive and a place that you can fight, right? Um, I really like this card. I think the future is going to show us just how good this card can end up being.
And yourself, Dakota?
I played with it a lot on Conquest. I was running like a disrupt discard, and it was fun. I mean, her jumping out locations. There's times when you're ending that with Dracula, and you're like, okay, I've been just destroying this APOC, but instead of letting Dracula get it, I'm just gonna go ahead and use this guy and let her get hit. She'll come out and join on this side, and I'll win actually that lane too. So it's cool. I mean, it's a well-designed card. It's been moving funly. Like, that's a weird way to say it. It's been moving really fun on any of the things I played with her. I really enjoyed just that style of discard. On the ladder, I didn't have as much success, but that was just because I kept getting paired with people who had counters on me. At least that's my excuse. But yeah, on Conquest, it went really smooth, and I really, really enjoyed this card.
Yeah, and I think Conquest is made for that, right? It's both people are still able to lose, but then I think how you persevere and how you play your hands in different types of games, it kind of shows what type of player you are. So Conquest, the only downside to Conquest that I see is that you're not pit up against somebody at your level. It's very random who you're playing against, right? Yeah. So you might be playing somebody that's really good, and you're toe to toe with them, but you don't know. So so it's not it's kind of hard to tell where you fall on the ladder when you're playing against people on Conquest. Now the ladder, it does show how good you are on the ladder, but then it doesn't show you how good you can be in Conquest, because Conquest takes another strategical aspect of the game in like reading your opponent's cards, seeing what they have, pitting up against what you have. So it's very different play, and I feel like Conquest could be more competitive if they did something of that fact where you match up against people of your same caliber, because then you could test yourself, right? But you never know if you will be testing yourself. So for myself, I think with this card, you guys kind of hit it on the nail with the hammer. Like this card has been really good in reliable discard, because you know what it does, and you're able to predict where it's going to go. And I think having that predictability instead of that randomness, I mean, the only time this will be random is probably when you hit it early on in the game, because then you have like two lanes that are like the same power and you don't know. But when you're able to control where this goes, this card kind of like it gets way better exponentially, because you're able to be like, okay, I just played a 0/7 card, for free. So it's very cool to see that discard is having that type of style where it's kind of just evolving its style, right? It's making it better. And I think that's something that a lot of the developers are doing well, at least with discard that we see, is that they're giving them more trick plays, right? They're tying it in with the old and making it new. So I feel like they did very well with this card. I have been playing it in a reliable discard deck. I know Lambie has released one on X, aka Twitter. So I feel like that deck, that reliable discard deck, does pretty well, and it's pretty fun to just mess around, especially towards the end of the season where it's just like we're trying to cool down for the next heat. that we're about to see, at least, tomorrow. And I know, Dakota, your heat's not going to die down. So good. I wish you luck in the next couple hours, and I think you can do it. So moving on to the next season. I wanted to reiterate this, that they are releasing 2 cards, and I feel like I just want to go really quick into this. How do you guys feel about them releasing 2 cards at the start of the season, where when they began this Spotlight Cash thing, we always got a break on the first week? So I want to start with you, Dakota. How do you feel on that change?
So something I was thinking about is, I don't pass on the season card, but there are people who do. And I wonder if this is something that they thought was more for the free-to-play people who do not want to buy that card. And they're like, oh, cool, I got nothing for a whole week. So maybe it was that idea. I'm not necessarily against it. It kind of it backfires sometimes when you're like, oh, I got to use these caches, or I got to use my tokens. It makes it for sure more of a money grab it's funny because I'm thinking, okay, the free-to-play player probably doesn't want to buy the season pass for whatever reason they want to do this. But at the same time, you're still going to be putting some cash down one way or another. So it's kind of a money grab for them, but it's kind of hard to say which way I prefer. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when you do it every now and then, I think it's good. Like, I think it's okay, you have especially if you're using a good card that first week, you're like, okay, you know what, you got a good card. It's different from the other card. It's going to be nice. When they do it back-to-back months, and all the cards are a tier 5 card, or so every one of them is 6,000, like, that's when it starts to become punitive, right? As a porpoise player, right? I've gotten really lucky these past couple weeks, right, to pull first 3 weeks in a row. I don't know how it happened, but it happened, right? I know for myself, that means right now I am going to take 4 pulls for this next one or something. Like, it all evens out in the end. So, as a porpoise player, I think as long as you don't keep doing this over and over, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, so I think I don't know if it's back-to-back months or it was 3 months in a row that they did this. But yeah, like when you're a free-to-play player, missing out on 2 cards for the first month. On top of that, the season card is not even put in the spotlights until the next month, right? So it's kind of tough to know that you're missing out on 2 cards if you skip on both, when you are a free to play player, because that means you're not getting every card every week. So that means you're falling behind a little bit further. I mean, some of these cards that they do release on a weekly basis are really good cards. I mean, we saw that in, Corvus Glaive it was a really good card for, the time. It still works, but it's a really good card. I don't know what I would replace it with if I didn't have it. With Proxima Midnight, I don't know what I would replace her with if I didn't have it. So they are kind of creating a system where they're leaving holes to be filled with tech cards, to be filled with other cards of their caliber, like side grades, but they're not really side grades. A lot of people would consider it downgrades. So it's very tough for those players that don't spend money. I mean, it's not any of these players I see here, but but I mean, on top of that, like I said earlier, it makes it hard for people that like see the game. They're like, oh, I love Marvel, or like say a kid that sees this game 10 years down the road, like, oh, I love this game, looks sick, and oh, it's going to take me 3 years to catch up. I can't play with the people that have been playing this game for about even if they're really good at the game, they won't be able to have a full collection unless they like drop major money. So, I mean, it is what it is. The game has to make money somehow. I wish they would rely more on getting that money for cosmetics, right? Instead of paywalling a lot of these cards, because some of these cards are detrimental to playing the game. And I feel like everybody should get to play the game at its highest level. So that's my only thoughts on that. On top of that, I want to say that this season, the variants for the season cards and the for every I don't know, for every Spotlight Cash of the main card is actually going to be made by Pandart. So I just realized that, and if you guys don't know who Pandart is, I'm going to go ahead and bring up one of the Pandart ones that, one of my favorites, but you can see them in the back right here. They did the most recent artist spotlight, but it's kind of funny because the art style has changed very much. Like the new Pandart for this month does not look like the 3D-ish kind of style that they had in the past month, which is kind of disappointing, if I do say so, because I really like Pandart's style with the stuff that they released. I mean, I bought almost every one. I think the only one I didn't buy was, I think I bought them all. So but it's kind of disappointing to see how different the art style has changed, because I did enjoy the art style that they did, and to see them change they made it more anime-ish and with more lightning. So I don't know, that's something that I don't know, it's a downgrade.
That's my lightning effect.
Good job.
So the upcoming card that we are getting is so the season pass card, I'll read it here, is Hope Summers, and this card is a 3 cost 4 power, and the effect is after you play a card here, you get +1 energy next turn. So how do you feel about the season pass card, Don?
I think this card is going to do for a lot of decks what X23 did for Destruction. I think the simple fact that you could play this card down on turn 3 and play something in that area to get an extra power is going to be huge for a lot of decks. I think you're really going to see a huge ramp, and not just ramp, but having that reliable, hey, I want 1 power. Or, I mean, you could even compound on this, right? Let's say you're playing it in a Thanos deck, right? You play which stone? It's the green stone, right?
Yeah.
The time stone, right?
Time.
Into this, right? Now you have 2 extra energy for that next turn. Like, I think we're going to see some really crazy builds with this card. And, I mean, I know I'll be getting the season pass, so...
I mean, I don't think anybody here is not getting it, so... from the guys that I see. What are your thoughts on this, Dakota?
I think it's pretty wild. I mean, if you were to be able to throw down a bunch of stuff, I mean, I'm thinking about move here, because we already been talking about move. This archetype probably will never work this way, but the fact that the way it reads is once you put something there, right? Now move it out of the way, putting more cards down, move it out of the way. Granted, you're going to run out of space probably, but it's cool to think about how many times you get more power by throwing stuff down. I think Don's analogy of what X23 did to this is a really perfect way to put it, because, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to go the Elsa Bloodstone route. Is it going to stay this way for long? I doubt it. We're probably going to get like a couple, maybe a week, 2 weeks. Probably, and then they'll probably change that around.
Yeah, they'll change it to you get 0.5 energy. You know, so you have to play 2 cards to get 1 energy or something like that.
It'll probably be something like you only get to use it once, like the first card or something like that. Like, because if it's the way it's reading, it sounds like I can put 3 cards on that and then
You
get
get 3
plus
energy. Yeah, next turn.
So Death put it wild.
Yeah, and I feel like but I think that's exactly why it's a 3 cost card. So you can't play it early on like X23, right? So by the time you play cards on it, it's turn 5 or 6 you're getting the benefit, right? Because if you're playing this on turn 3, you can't play anything else on it. So that means on turn 4, that's when you're playing it. Turn 5 and 6 is when you're going to get the energy output from it. So it's good to know it's in the later parts of the game, and it's not too broken where it's like you can't really discount it unless you get Elysium, unless you get Sarah. So, but like I said, Sarah's not till like later in the game. So I think the ones that would benefit from this is probably if you play. I'm trying to see how you could benefit from this right when you play it.
Okay. Well, while you're thinking, I got an idea.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. What if you played Surprise Galactus with this card?
Oh, you son of a gun! Oh,
That
Surprise.
is so good.
You just got
surprise!
Galactus.
Okay, question. Okay, no, never mind. I answered my own question. Brood won't work on this. You only get +1 because the broodlings don't count as being played.
But here's the thing, right? What's the thing about Galactus, right? You're always worried about, okay, at what point can I play him? Now, let's say, what do you normally play in a Surprise Galactus? Psylocke, right? You play Psylocke, you get that out early, you know you've destroyed that, right? You throw so you could play him, turn 4, right?
It depends. So if you play Psylocke on 2, and then you play Hope Summers and another card.
You play.
Oh no, you can't play him until 5. Yeah, you can't play him until 5 unless you have you have Hope Summers, a 1 cost and a 0 cost. So what's her name? Wasp. Yeah. So that's the only way you're kind of benefiting from this. But I see where you're going with this, and it's going to be interesting because, like you said, it is kind of a ramp card, and I do love that they are leaving all the ramp cards at 3 cost, so everybody can utilize them at 3. So so in order for you to combat a ramp deck is to play a ramp deck. So I like how they're kind of doing that. But no, I think in my head, I'm not really making it work. I think the best you can do with this is play this on turn 3 and then play a bunch of small things to get out of the way. Maybe that move, and then you get the pluses from there. You play your 6 cost on this. That way you get more energy the next turn. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good season pass card. I don't know if it's going to be broken. I think it's going to take time to see, but I'm definitely going to, usually with new cards, I wait for someone else to build something and just see how they thought of it and, try it out. I think I'm actually going to try putting my mitts on this one this time.
Ooh. Lucky Hope Summers.
Any additional thoughts on this that you guys have?
No, it's going to be exciting to see because it's going to fit into so many different decks and deck types.
Yeah, I think that's what I like what you mentioned is that it's not pigeonholed into playing a certain deck. You could play this in a generic deck and it being useful. So now the next card we have, we are getting 2 cards. So the next card we have is Pixie. It's going to be a 2 cost, 1 power card, and the effect is on reveal, shuffle the cost of all cards in your deck that started there. So it's a card that will shuffle all the costs that are in your deck. It's not going to shuffle anything in your hand. How do you feel about this card coming into the game next week, Dakota? Or sorry, tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. I think it's going to be interesting with those higher cost cards, man, shuffling them out. We already are getting to that time where it's just high stats. So if we can actually bring them out, it's another style of ramp. Sweet. I'm all for it. Let's have some fun with that. It also can coincide pretty smoothly, I feel like, with the season pass card together. I think that's some pretty cool stuff going on here. I'm definitely excited for this card.
I think the RNG on this card is actually going great.
Sorry, you're gonna have to repeat yourself. You cut out just a little bit, so go ahead and start over.
Oh my goodness. Anyways, so I think the RNG on this card is actually gonna really hinder its effectiveness. So because you don't know which cards are switching with what, you're actually gonna mess yourself up, I think, as often as you're going to be increasing, right? So if you knew that, like, okay, all the high ones are going to switch with the low ones, great. But I could just see myself having a whole hand of like high cost, low power cards. Right? It's kind of like, when you're playing that, like, your Thanos deck, and you're like, man, I got all my big cards, and then you get hit by the peak, and you're just like, well, I'm out. Like, I think this card's going to have a lot of that effect.
Okay, so I will say this card will go very well with, to mention, well, I'll say this now. She's going to go very good with Mobius and Mobius. I feel like playing her on 2 and then playing Mobius on 3, it basically gets all your cards that went higher back to its original cost, but anything that got lower stay the same, stay as its lowest cost. And I think that goes hand in hand because the spotlight this week is Pixie, Spider-Ham, and Mobius and Mobius. So I feel like they already know that there's going to be a synergistic pairing between Pixie and Mobius. And I know you mentioned this earlier, Dakota, but also running into opponents' Mobius. You might see more Mobius running around because with this card, like you said, Don, it could make your higher cards lower. It makes your lower cards higher, but with the effect of Mobius on your side, you benefit from it. But if they play Mobius, Pixie's just a 2-1.
Yep.
So, and it's on the field. So you just, well, I played this for no reason. So, the thing that's going to be very interesting to see is how it works out if they Mobius you, and then you either rogue their Mobius or Enchantress it. Does it mix it up again, or does it keep the original mix-up behind like a hidden wall and it just reverts back to what it was? So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I feel like this card can be a fun card. Sorry, I didn't show it. I don't know if I showed it at all. But yeah, I feel like it's going to be a fun card. And I feel like it's something that should bring the fun back into Marvel Snap, right? Because, we always start these seasons off really competitive, but it's going to be cool to see how fun this season can start off with Pixie and with Hope Summers. You're going to get a bunch of high energy games with cards that cost close to nothing. So it's going to be interesting and fun to see. Now, do you guys have any additional thoughts on Pixie?
Nah, I mean, honestly, I didn't even think about Mobius and Mobius. That's a really good call on that one. God, you just hope you pull them, right?
Yeah, right. So that's the thing, because Dakota mentioned it being played against you if you do play Pixie. But I was like, yo, it's good if you actually play Mobius with it, right? Because like I said, if something gets hit and goes higher, it just goes back to its original. The things that went lower stay at lower. So I was like, it's probably something we gotta talk about tomorrow once we pull for it, right? Because I don't see anybody here that's not gonna get it. Yeah, okay.
Nah, I'm gonna pass.
So with that, I just want to say the new season will be Avengers versus X-Men, so that's going to be cool. I haven't seen any of the card backs, but I'm excited to see if we do get an Avengers card back because we haven't got one at all. So I'm excited for that. Anything before we close it out? Is there anything you guys are excited for this month?
I'm excited to get right back to fighting for Infinite.
It's the grind, man.
I'm excited to climb back.
It was a nice 2 days off.
What were you saying, Dakota?
I'm excited to climb back from the 60s.
We don't know that just yet.
In fact, I ain't making it in this go around.
It's not. You have what 12? They're 14 hours. I know 9 of it is probably going to be sleep, but
I want to sleep, dog. Yeah, we'll see. I'll give it a shot. We'll see if anything happens, but yeah, we'll see how we do. I'm excited for all these new cards. It's going to be a bundle of joy. Whatever we get into, I'm cool for the new variants coming up. We got Okoye, we got Nakia, we got some pretty cool ones there. So yeah, I mean, it's cool to. I'm pumped. It's just like normal. It's always a good time to play Marvel Snap, even though it hates me. And it's funny. It's like every time I'm like, yeah, this card's gonna be great. I look back and I'm like, y'all hate this card.
Everybody else is having a way better time.
This makes sense to me.
All right. Well, until the next episode, gentlemen, I will bid you guys adieu.